This is a coding of a Taylor and Francis journal, Self and Identity. Our first step is to fill in the form with the journal name, following precisely the name used in Web of Science and other databases. Then we need to find, if available, the ISSN number for Taylor and Francis. I don't see where that is. It's not listed on the front page, but maybe it's in one of the other pages for the journal. Just skimming around, I do not see it. And what I also do not see as I'm skimming around is information about email contacts. So assuming I won't get it, I will copy the name of the editor-in-chief while I am bouncing around. Journal information. There's ISSN. Online ISSN number. That's the one I want. There are two here. If there are two, take the online one. I post that to journal ISSN. The society information would usually be listed right on the front page. In fact, Self and Identity, you can see here, is associated with the International Society for Self and Identity. So I will copy that and paste that as a society affiliation. I did not see editorial contact information in my quick review. This, if you can find it, that's good, but I did not see it there. All I saw was information about the editorial board. So for now, I'll just take the editor-in-chief's name and put that in that place, and then later someone can add more information about metadata. Then we want to go to the instructions for authors, the main place where policy information is, although note that in Taylor and Francis case, there's the instruction for authors and there's this editorial policy. So there's going to be 2 pages probably that we use. But we'll start with the instruction for authors because that has a lot of information that's specific to this journal. And we will create a PermaCC link with that. If you do not have PermaCC to make a permanent link for that page, then just use the link of the journal's author instructions page. Okay, that's all the key metadata. Now we actually evaluate the policy for top guidelines. So you will get accustomed to looking at particular journals or particular publishers' approach to listing their policies. They have pretty standard ways that they do it. So I'm just going to skim through here looking for keywords or information that is relevant to top guidelines so that I can identify how this journal aligns with it. You can see there's information about abstracts, funding details, disclosure statement, maybe. Nope, that's a financial interest one. Okay, data availability statement. That's a good sign. If there's a data set associated with the paper, please provide information about what the data supporting the results or analyses presented in the paper can be found. That sounds like it is a requirement for disclosing whether the data are available or not. It's the language isn't please provide is not completely unambiguous about whether it's a requirement, but it is not a should or encourage. It's a provide it. And they even include some templates for how to provide a data availability statement. So that data availability statement also mentions the analysis code supporting the results or analyses. Well, it doesn't quite mention the code, does it? It just mentions data set. So we will give that a data transparency. It definitely requires a data availability, or it seems to require a data availability statement. It doesn't require data sharing, just requires that they say whether the data are available or not. So that would get a score of 1. And I'll just place a note here, requires data availability. All right, but it did not at least mention codes, so tentatively I'm going to give the code value a 0, but that might get revised as we continue scrolling through. So templates are available, data deposition. If you choose to share or make data, okay, so it's very clearly not a requirement to share data, just a requirement to say whether or not. Okay, that's all for there. Submitting your paper. Data sharing policy. This journal applies Taylor-based basic data sharing policy. Authors are encouraged to share or make open data. Again, it's affirming that it's not a requirement to share. Encouraged to deposit data in a recognized repository. Further encouraged to cite any data sets referenced in the article and provide a data availability. So that's good that they're encouraging citation of data sets, but it is not requiring that people cite them. So encouragement there may not be enough to earn a point. So we will copy that to look at the data citation statement. So no mention of data citation 0. Journal describes citation of data and guidelines with clear rules and examples. Well, we certainly had it described. Further encouraged to cite any data sets. Did they provide any examples or information about how to cite it? So they have a link here, cite any data sets referenced. When I click the link, it doesn't go to anything. So that didn't help me with examples. So it seems like they might have had the intent to make their data sets provide some guidance about how to cite data sets, but they did not do so. So unfortunately, that gets a score of 0 because they didn't provide rules and examples. And this is a big problem for data citation, is they say cite data, but then they don't actually put it in the reference list, which is where you actually get credit for citing data. And they certainly don't require it, they just encouraged it. So a 0 still on data citation. Although when we point that out, they may make an easy change to increase the score there. So data sharing policy, anything else here? At the point of submission, you will be asked if there's a data set associated with the paper. If yes, provide the DOI, pre-registered DOI, okay, that's not about pre-registration, hyperlink, or other persistent identifier associated with data sets. Okay, well that's good. It doesn't change or update the policy any. It's just saying that you will have to you'll have to say whether or not the data are available. Publication charges, copyright options, complying with policies, author works, reprints, queries. Okay, that's all the information we get from the instructions for authors. Because they have this additional editorial policies, we should probably jump to that, which is a standard, I think, Taylor and Francis wide set of policies. So we can scroll through those to see if there's any that are relevant to top guidelines so that we can give those scores. Here is arriving at data sharing policies. Are you submitting? Is there data set? Many Taylor and Francis journals have policies. So the policies we already saw, which is they apply the basic policy, which is requiring a data availability statement. That's a score of 1. And then it mentions that there are repositories, gives some information about those, where those repositories are. That's all good, but it doesn't give us anything to change our scores. Editorial code of conduct, harassment, images and figures, third-party material, protected content, misconduct. All of these are good things, but not directly top relevant. Plagiarism, preprints, sharing your work, research ethics, privacy. So standards of reporting. Okay, this is good because they could get a reporting score. Research should be communicated, support verification reproducibility. We encourage authors to provide descriptions of research rationale, protocol, methodology, analysis. So that's nice that they're encouraging it. It is not, however, a requirement for disclosure. So, but it will at least get a material. I'll put this text in the materials transparency just so that we can note what was reported that's relevant to methodology and materials. And I'll just add a note, encouraged, not required. And because it's only encouraged, that still gets a score of 0. It's nice they mentioned it, but that's not going to impact researcher behavior very much. But there's also something there about reporting guidelines. To aid the authors in this, a number of study design specific consensus-based reporting guidelines have been developed. We recommend you use these as guidance prior to submitting your manuscript. And then they reference the Equator Network and the MIBBI Foundry portal. These are both good. This is a very general statement. It's not specific to this journal in any particular way, but at least it is mentioning that there are such things as reporting guidelines. So even though it's not journal specific, it meets the requirement here for reporting guidelines of articulating design transparency standards. So it does get a score of 1, and I'm going to quote and put in the relevant part of it. I happen to know the substance of this particular journal is not likely to use any of those reporting guidelines, but because it is a general policy, in this case it does get a score of 1. And that was everything that was in that journal. So let's review our scores to see if any have not been scored yet, just because they weren't mentioned at all. We have most of them scored. It didn't say anything about pre-registration, score 0. Analysis pre-registration, score 0. Said nothing about replication. Didn't address publication bias, blind review, registered reports. Didn't mention badges at all. Okay, so those are all the scores for a Taylor and Francis journal.